Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the last day of Kaladesh preview cards. Now, we are going to get some more cards tomorrow. However, the full set will be revealed tomorrow, and we'll begin our full set review starting with all of the white cards. But today, we have 10 new cards to look at, and we also have the rest of the tokens to peek at as well. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out in the description below, you'll see a link to our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases through any of those links through that store, a small percentage will come back to help the channel. So thank you to everyone who's already done that, or to anyone considering it. And also, as always, thanks to the patrons on Patreon to help make these videos possible. Having said that, let's get into the new information for today, and we're going to start off with the tokens. So first off, we have Thopter tokens, 3 different pieces of art this time around. Next, we have 3 pieces of art for the Servo tokens, 2 for the constructs, and these are both star constructs. And finally, you get your 3 emblems for your 3 planeswalkers that require emblems. Alright, let's move on to the new cards for the day. We're going to start off with Fairgrounds Warden. 1 white and 2, Dwarf Soldier, uncommon 1/3. And when this enters the battlefield, exile target creature and opponent controls until Fairgrounds Warden leaves the battlefield. So very reminiscent, of course, of Fiend Hunter. Many of you have probably played with that card, so you're very aware of how good it is and what its power level is. This time around, it's a Dwarf Soldier, so that's a nice twist on it. That's going to play well with some of the mechanics that we have already seen spoiled in this set, so that will be relevant. And if you've never played with Fiend Hunter before, it's a very good card. I mean, sometimes it feels like a tempo play because you are able to get rid of your opponent's best creature as long as this stays alive. So eventually they could take this thing out, but by doing so, they've lost tempo. You're hopefully able to attack in a little more, or at least defend yourself from that creature for a period of time. And then if they use their removal on this as opposed to maybe one of your stronger creatures or something you're about to play like a bomb, you found a lot of value there. This card could very well see some standard play if the metagame is calling for a tool like this, and it is going to be phenomenal for you in Limited. Also, cards like Fiend Hunter see play in cubes and Commander all the time, so this is just another option to go to there. Next we have Fumigate, 2 white and 3, it's a sorcery rare. Destroy all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. Now, Wizards has gone on record to say that they're not looking to make 4 casting cost board sweeps, at least in the current standard environment. So your Wrath of God style cards you're probably not going to see for a while. But 5 casting costs, sometimes 6 casting costs seems to be what they're doing right now, and they try to give you a little bit of an upside to it. This time around it costs 5, but you gain a little bit of life, which a lot of times won't be very consequential, but other times it could matter, especially considering in this particular environment there are some valid token strategies, I think, out there with all the Servo tokens, so you could potentially get a lot of life off this in certain situations. But I think where this card is really significant is the fact that this is going to be a big piece of the Azorius control deck in Standard. And I think I said even as early as yesterday that I wasn't sure they'd give us all the pieces to that deck and make it ultra efficient, just because the last time Azorius control was popular and was strong was back in the Sphinx's Revelation days, and that did lead to a lot of people playing this very grindy control deck, and it led to a lot of matches ending at time and stuff like that. So I wasn't sure if they'd want to go down that route in the same way again, but we are starting to get a lot of cards that really support that archetype, and they've been sprinkled in all along. I mean, you look a few sets back and you get like Scattered to the Winds, and then you get like Reflector Mage, and then Spell Queller, and now all of a sudden with this set you're getting Fumigate and a lot of other strong support cards for that archetype. We're actually going to look at another one in just a couple minutes. So I do think it's going to get there. I think it's going to be a very valid archetype for Standard. Again, outside of Standard, this card isn't super exciting because you have cards like Wrath of God and Damnation that do a similar thing cheaper, right? But at least for this Standard environment, hey, I'd rather pay 5 than 6 for a board sweep. So this isn't that bad, really, when you consider the current Standard situation. As far as Limited goes, these are always good for you in Limited. A lot of times they're just a panic button. In case things don't go your way, you're able to play this and kind of reset the board a little bit. If you happen to draw this, then maybe you kind of slow roll a little bit, let your opponent overcommit, and then you just put this down, and then you're able to kind of dump your hand and try to win that way. So these are always strong in Limited. So good card. I'm glad to see it. If we can't have Wrath of God, I guess this is going to be just fine. Next, we have a card that comes to us as a Korean language spoiler. Loosely translated, it's Era of Innovation, 1 blue and 1, enchantment. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, you get 2 energy counters, and if you pay 6 energy, sacrifice this and draw 3 cards. Now, normally I say I'm not a huge fan of enchantments that come onto the battlefield and do absolutely nothing, and this literally does nothing. If you play this on turn 2, you probably won't even really get a chance to get value out of it. Maybe turn 4, 5, 6, even 7, just because you may be using all your mana to cast your spells, and really holding them back a turn just to get the extra energy is going to feel really awkward. But having said that, there are some payoffs for this card. Getting the extra energy in the late game, you could put that towards a good payoff. For example, if you have Thopter Virtuoso and Decoction Module in play, you can find a lot of value there. I mean, the Virtuoso will give you 3 energy counters. You can turn those into a Thopter, and then when that Thopter comes into play, as long as you have 1 more mana to pay, you get 2 energy counters back. The Decoction Module will give you a 3rd one, and then as long as you have the mana, you can just keep doing that. So let's say you have 3 mana available, you can just create 3 Thopter tokens potentially. So that's actually kind of cool, right? And now it's a 3-card combo, so that's not going to be really easy to pull off, especially in a world without tutors, right? So it's interesting though that they put that in the set, that there are combos like that to be found, and that seems powerful, but also seems like it could be a trap at times. So let's examine this card, at least for what it is. If I'm able to get some energy, and maybe I'm getting energy from another source, taking 6 energy and exchanging that for 3 cards, that actually seems pretty good too. So maybe that's where this card actually might be better, is if I just go ahead and play this, get energy from other sources, and then turn that energy into card draw, into basically an Ancestral Recall. It's almost like a delayed Ancestral Recall for 2, right? If you look at it that way. That actually sounds good, right? So there are things you can do with this card as long as it doesn't get disenchanted or something in the meantime. I want to try this out. I'd play this in limited. I don't know how good it will be or how high of a pick it will be, but I feel like this could be better than perhaps it looks. As far as the combo goes, would I try to draft it? Yeah, I would probably try to draft it. I mean, I don't know if it ever pan out, but I would give it a shot, right? Nothing to lose. As far as standard goes, I don't know. It feels a little unstable. Like, it feels a little janky. Even though those cards really don't cost all that much to put out there, you do have to get them all out there. You do have to have the extra mana. And take into account, too, it costs the mana to do that. So if you have the ability to create maybe 2 Thopters one turn, maybe next turn you can create 4 Thopters. I mean, that does add up if your opponent doesn't have a board sweep or a way to stop that or anything. They will have Summoning Sickness, of course, so it's not like Splinter Twin combo, right? So it is a little bit slower, but if your opponent can get rid of any part of that combo, it just kind of ends. So I think that's what you'd have to worry about in like standard, for example. Might be really fun to pull off in commander though, or even throw these things in your cube and see what you can do with them, right? But other than that, I think it's a good limited card for the right deck. You're not always going to play this, obviously, but if you have enough sources of energy, just playing this for the card draw could be good enough. Insidious Will, 2 blue and 2. This is a rare instant. Choose one of the following: counter target spell, or you may choose new targets for target spell, or copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, this is the card I alluded to earlier. Module cards always very, very powerful because they give you a lot of options. Now, a card like this, granted, probably not as powerful as, say, a Cryptic Command or something like that, but in today's standard environment, I think this is a really, really good card. First off, one option is to just simply counter a spell for 4. Okay, that feels a little pricey for a counter spell. There's other options out there, but at the same time, you're getting the option to perhaps use one of the other modes, and that's why you're paying extra. Secondly, you can deflect targets, and notice it's not just something targeting one target. You can actually give new targets for the target spell, so that can be multiple targets. They don't do that all the time, so that's actually really, really good. It can be anything from spot removal, or if they have something that says do a point of damage to one creature and another creature, then you can go ahead and deflect both those points of damage to where you want them to go. Now, the third one is a fork effect. That's probably the least exciting out of the 3, just because it's hard to think of a situation where if my opponent plays a spell that I'll want to fork it more so than maybe redirect it. I guess maybe a card draw spell would be an example where you might want to fork it, but I don't know if I'd want to waste this on just drawing a couple cards when my opponent does at the same time, just because if they draw into something big, this is my chance to kind of block it with a counter spell, right? So I don't know if that would be very beneficial. The other way you'd use the fork ability, of course, is if you played a spell that was maybe a powerful burn spell or something, you want to copy it, but again, that gets really expensive considering this costs 4, 2 of it on color, so how realistic is that, right? But even if it only had the first 2 modes, I think it's still very, very good. And because of that, I do think it's standard playable. It could show up in the Azorius style control decks, or if I'm playing limited, it's really good there too. More than happy to play this as a counterspell or deflection. Fantastic in a lot of situations where you could really turn the tables on somebody if they have spot removal or something like that. Next, we have a card that comes to us from a Japanese language spoiler. Loosely translated, it's Master of Marionettes, 2 black and 4, Human Artificer, Fabricate 3. This is also a 1/3. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Master of Marionette's power. And this is a rare, I should point out. So it's an interesting effect, and I talked a little bit yesterday about kind of creating endless loops in Modern or in Commander with cards like Enduring Renewal and kind of doing the Fruity Pebbles style reoccursion of a creature. And a lot of times you can do that with, say, an Ornithopter type creature. This is a 0 casting cost creature. You put it into play, you sacrifice it to something. So this card would work with that type of combo as well. However, this is very expensive, and there's just cheaper ways to do it, right? We actually saw one of them yesterday. I think it was yesterday. But a 6 casting cost card, probably not going to fit into a combo deck like that. So we really have to kind of evaluate this card on its own. On its own, it's a fine limited card. I think the pricing of this card is going to price it out of, say, even standard at this point, but I wouldn't hesitate to play this in limited as long as I don't have any better 6 drops. I mean, it's a 1/3, but with the Fabricate 3, you got to think it's coming in as perhaps a 4/6 if I need a big creature to block, like if I'm on the defense, for example, or if I'm just looking to be more offensive and go wide, then a 1/3 with 3 servo tokens is actually pretty good too. So I mean, you're getting what you pay for here, and it can be very good in certain situations. So yeah, definitely a strong limited card, I think, for the right deck. Next we have Syndicate Trafficker, cost a black and 1, Aetherborn Rogue, rare, 3/1, pay 1, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on this, aka is indestructible till end of turn. So first off, these stats are great. I mean, black doesn't always get 3/1s for 2. I mean, every once in a while, but you usually see this more in white creatures than you do in black creatures. Now, also on top of it, you can pay into mana and sacrifice an artifact to give this thing a +1/+1 counter and make it indestructible till end of turn. So it helps deal with spot removal sometimes, but really what this thing wants to do is just get in the red zone. I mean, you play this, and if you have any expendable artifacts lying around or servo tokens that are just kind of sitting on a gummed up board, you just attack in with this thing, sacrifice them to give this +1/+1 counters. It's indestructible if they try to pull some sort of removal. It's just really hard to deal with as long as you have the artifacts to back it up. So I think this would work very well in a Fabricate style deck. Definitely good and limited if you have a deck like that. Now if you don't have a lot of artifacts that are going to be expendable that you can pay into this, it becomes a little bit worse. But hey, it's still a 3/1 for 2. That's actually still good and limited. Even if you never use the ability, I think it's still fine to run this. And I always say it, but the 2-drop is the most important part of your limited deck. If people make a mistake building a limited deck, that mistake 99% of the time is they don't give themselves enough 2-drops. So don't overlook a good 2-drop when you see it, and this one's very, very decent. I think this potentially could see some play in standard. I'm not sure what deck wants it, but I guess we'll have to kind of see the full set tomorrow and see if there's enough ways to get a lot of cheap tokens that you could kind of feed to this thing. I feel like there could be, and if there are, there's potential somebody could brew something with this. Next we have a card that's a reprint, Chief of the Foundry. It costs 3. It's an artifact creature construct, uncommon, 2/3. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Now this card was in Magic Origins, so it's actually still standard legal right now. It sees a tad bit of play in kind of an Izzet artifact style deck, so it used to see more play in standard, but it still exists out there. We see it from time to time. So we kind of know what this card does in standard, or in the case of like Modern or Legacy doesn't do, right? This seems like it would be a cool card for like Affinity, but there's just cheaper ways to do this right now in those other formats, so it never really crossed over into there. But having said that, great limited card, especially in this set. It always felt maybe a little out of place in Magic Origins because you had a few situations where you had Thopters and stuff, but in this set, this thing could be potentially just a bomb, right? And obviously I think its role in standard will also increase once this set's released. So I think it's pretty cool that it's sticking around in the environment, because it really didn't get its chance to shine, but I think now it will for really what it is, which is a fantastic creature for the current standard environment. And actually the next 3 cards we're going to look at are going to play very well with it, and it makes me feel like, and you'll kind of know more what I'm talking about in just a second, that they're trying to create like a slower version of like an affinity style deck for standard, and this is going to be one of the key parts to it. Foundry Inspector, cost 3, artifact creature construct, uncommon, 3/2. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So now I think you're starting to see the picture here. Now these are both 3 drops, however, this will make things cost less, and this can stack. So if you get one of these out, all of a sudden this and the previous card we saw only cost 2, and the previous card starts making this bigger, actually makes it a 4/3, start playing really nice together, right? Starts to feel a little bit familiar. Now again, these are a little more expensive than what you see in like Modern Affinity, for example, but there are similar effects in that format. So we've kind of seen how powerful that can be. It looks like Wizards is trying to create kind of a slower version of that for us to play around with. Next we have Self-Assembler. Cost 5, it's an artifact creature, assembly worker, common, 4/4. When Self-Assembler enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an assembly worker or creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now, there could be other assembly workers aside from this one, but considering this one's called Self-Assembler, I kind of feel like this would probably be the only one we see in the set. But it is a common. You should be able to get maybe a few of these in a draft, right? And even at 5 mana, I think there's a lot of value to be had here. I mean, you pay 5, you get a 4/4, and you immediately get to search for another copy of this. That's actually pretty strong. It is going to allow you to keep getting heat, even though the creature itself doesn't have evasion or anything, but I think for what you're paying for it, it's still very economical. If it costs 6, maybe I'd be a little more hesitant, but I think at 5, I feel real good about it. But again, this really shines with those previous 2 cards we saw. So if you have those 2 on the battlefield, now you're paying 4 for a 5/5, and you're getting to search for another one. That feels even better, right? So again, it just feels like they're giving us the tools to create this artifact creature engine. And that's going to bring us to the last card of the day, and another card that fits into this theme, Workshop Assistant. It costs 3, artifact creature construct, common, 1/2. When artifact assistant dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So the only thing awkward about this series of cards is so many of them cost 3. However, if you get the Foundry Inspector out, then all of a sudden they cost 2. That feels a whole lot better. So if you couple this with Chief of the Foundry and Foundry Inspector, for example, when those cards die, here's a possible way to get them back out of the graveyard and get them back into play again. That seems like it could be really, really good. So again, I think this is very standard playable. I think there's a deck here. I think they're really giving us the pieces as something very unique. And also, any of these cards I think will work really well together in Limited. Even if you draft a couple of each one here or there, you still have enough, I think, to make an impact along with the other cards that you draft to get some value, if nothing else. So I think all 4 of these cards, I think, are very good for Limited, as well as potentially could be very, very good in Standard going forward. Having said that, those are the cards for today, and that wraps up all our preview cards that we'll be looking at for Kaladesh. Now, like I said, tomorrow there will be some new cards, of course, but we're going to get the full set revealed. So we're going to just begin our full set review, starting with all the white cards, and we'll make our way through the color pie. And once we get through the full set, we'll also do our pre-release primer as we normally do. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.